what we're about in this podcast is what are the actual root causes of these issues, right? So we can, by all means, treat the symptoms if you need to treat the symptoms to feel better in the moment. But what are the root causes? Let's actually find and address the root causes so we can actually be free of these things or massively reduce it without having to manage symptoms or with minimal managing of symptoms.
Welcome to the Rejuvenate podcast. I'm your host, Krissy Hawks, and I am here with my co-host, Elwin Robinson. Today, we are talking about allergies, sensitivities, and intolerances, what causes them, and what you can do about them. So, Elwin, tell me today, why did you choose this topic?
Well, these are definitely issues that I've suffered with a lot throughout my life again, and I feel like it's one of those things that there's not good solutions for out there. But more than anything, I feel like this topic, this episode flows perfectly from the previous ones on chronic pain. So, spoiler alert for what we get into. Inflammation is one of the big factors that causes all these problems. And we talked about that a lot in the chronic pain episodes. And then stuff to do with the immune system and how it's affected by the nervous system is also very important. And we talked about that a lot in the previous episode. So I'd actually say if you're watching this, if you can possibly bring yourself to do it, if it's not too much and you haven't already watched or listened to the previous episodes, I would recommend you do so because that was long because I had to introduce a lot of new stuff and I'm not going to go through it in anywhere near as much depth again in this episode because it would just be repetition for those of you who are watching every episode. So definitely check out those previous episodes. But yeah, so allergies and intolerances are really debilitating, first and foremost. I find that they make your life really limiting. Like for instance, I don't think she'll mind me sharing for my wife, she had bad hay fever. And it means that during the part of the year that most people would be like in this kind of climate, we're in the UK, north of the UK currently, where most people are like, oh, thank God I can finally go outside. I can enjoy the sun. I can enjoy, fresh air. She has to be locked indoors with all the windows closed, or she did until we, I wouldn't say fully resolved, but massively resolved it. And then for me, the issue is more that I've got to a point twice in my life. Once a long time ago, like 15-ish years ago, once recently, like 2 years ago, where there were so few foods I could eat. Literally, I could count the foods that I didn't react to on one hand, not even two. So this is like very limiting in a different way. Like there's nothing I can eat. Most supplements, herbs, all of that as well. They all disagreed with me. I reacted to all of them. And so other than the practicalities of not being able to go outside when it's sunny or even get any fresh air, or the practicalities of hardly being able to eat anything and the nutritional deficiencies that will inevitably create and all the rest of it, it's also like very impactful on your quality of life, and it makes you very kind of fearful, like of things that you shouldn't be fearful for, of, right? I can't even go out in the sun. I can't even eat food, right? These are like very fundamental, basic things. So I have a lot of compassion and sympathy for people in that position because I've been in that position. I will not claim that I'm completely free of them. There is a genetic factor that influences it, which we'll definitely talk about in depth. But I would say now it's more, I can list on maybe two hands all the things I can't eat rather than one hand all the things I can. So it's a huge difference. And ditto with my wife. I don't think she would say that she has zero hay fever, but I'd say the symptoms gone down by 90%. This last summer, she was able to be outside most of the time. So that's a big one. Anything that, because ultimately what we're focused on in this podcast is how to feel younger, how to rejuvenate ourselves, how to at least, even if maybe we're not trying to be younger than we are, how at least not to feel prematurely old. And of course, if you feel like I can barely eat anything, I can't leave the house, that's not a youthful position to be in. Another thing is that it's an early warning sign of potentially more serious issues. So we'll talk about the root causes, what I've identified as 3 root causes of all of these issues. And those 3 root causes are, especially one of them, is implicated in most of the diseases that actually kill us in the modern age. So, this is a great early warning sign. Now, of course, Does that mean you're necessarily going to die early? No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying all other thing being equal with statistics and all the rest of it, it's a sign, especially if you have severe symptoms, it's a sign that things are not optimal. And then just as we talked about, and again, as I said, this is like a continuation of the chronic pain and inflammation episodes, it also has the same problem as chronic pain in that a lot of people don't think about it because there are drugs available that help, like there are painkillers. So there are also antihistamines and, EpiPens as well, I guess. And then Sudafed type drugs is another, huge one because one of the things it does is block your nose. And having a blocked nose is really not good because a lot of research has been done recently that indicates if you're breathing through your mouth majority of the time rather than breathing through your nose, that has loads and loads of negative impacts on your overall health again. A great person who documented this, guy called James Nestor, did a book called Breathe. Highly recommend that. If you are unconvinced about me just saying it in one sentence, there's a whole book that talks about it in depth. And yeah, so those drugs, I would not say they're as dangerous as like opioids and stuff like we talked about in the last episode, but the antihistamines and Sudafed drugs still have some significant side effects because histamine is one of those root cause issues, spoiler alert, and it is something that, yes, excessive amounts are not good, but also a lack of it is not good. Histamine is another hormone as well as a neurotransmitter. And so whenever you mess with one of your key hormones and neurotransmitters, just to deal with a symptom, I know we talked previously about optimizing our levels of hormones, but that's different from just reducing a hormone because you can't stand a symptom. It can create a lot of other knock-on problems. So it's fine if you need to take antihistamines or painkillers or anything. I'm not knocking that. But what we're about in this podcast is what are the actual root causes of these issues, right? So we can, by all means, treat the symptoms if you need to treat the symptoms to feel better in the moment. But what are the root causes? Let's actually find and address the root causes so we can actually be free of these things or massively reduce it without having to manage symptoms or with minimal managing of symptoms.
No, the allergies played a big part for me in over-the-counter medicine for a very, very long time until I really started getting deeper into health. And it really, I met a woman at a yoga retreat, and then she was talking about all these different things of just opened my mind to how the body is a very intelligent system. And here I was doing things that were, it felt in that education in opposition to allowing the body to do its natural processes. And that's what spurred me on to finding, like what you're saying, the real root cause, or figuring out, hang on a second, what is going on in my body and how can I support it to do what it really does best, which is work magically. But before, besides all of that, getting deeper into these allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities, can you explain the difference of each of these in more detail?
Yes, and I'll just address what you said, which is, I haven't actually talked to you about that before, Krissy. So if you feel like by the end of this episode, there's anything that I've left out that helped you, then add it in. Let's see. So yeah, allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities. Now, I'm going to give my definition, which broadly does align with the mainstream, like general definition, but sometimes there are exceptions. So I'm going to lay out in a way which I feel is the most helpful. So allergies are a specific type of immune reaction generally called an IgE immune reaction. So IgE stands for immunoglobulin. So it's a particular type of immune response. Now, it is a type of immune response which is much more correlated to this thing called histamine, which we'll get into in a bit. But because it is, so the type of immune response it is stronger and more immediate. And so IgE allergies are the type that are usually show up within a few minutes. They can be quite severe and they can even kill you. Like things, the peanut allergy, stuff like that. A person can go into anaphylactic shock while they can't breathe. And that is an immune response, and that is also a histamine response. So that's allergies. And so that's something that can be tested for in most cases, an IgE, and it's something that your doctor may even test you for. Because again, medical professionals tend to only be concerned with things which are, life-threatening or borderline life-threatening. This is, right? So they may well be willing to test that if you have a really extreme reaction to anything. It's not just foods. It can be things that you inhale, things that you inject, things that you absorb through the skin, anything can potentially be an allergen. So IgG is is the other type of immune response, and that is what is generally, I say generally because this is where it gets a little bit more nebulous, but generally referred to as an intolerance. And so this is still an immune response, but it's more mild generally, although more mild doesn't mean that it's nothing. It can still ruin the quality of your life, but it's not generally immediately, well, no, it's not immediately life-threatening. It's generally not life-threatening at all. It has not only a milder response, but also a delayed response. And the reason why that's so important is because if you have something happen within a few minutes of contact with an allergen, then it's pretty clear what's caused it in most cases. I mean, not always. Say if it happens in response to a meal, you might be struggling. What is it? What could it be? You know, but still, you know, it's something in that meal. With an intolerance, it can take up to, most people say, about 3 days before it shows up. So if you know, maybe the average is more like a day, something like that. So if you start feeling bad the next day, like the brain, you know, the way that the kind of primitive, like limbic system brain works is like, when there is pain and discomfort, it like looks around at the immediate environment and tries to work out what's wrong, right? And that's understandable because that, you know, helped us to survive until this point. But it's not very helpful with this. Like nothing what you're doing right now probably explains why you have intolerance symptoms. But it's so that can be a tricky thing to navigate. So it's milder, it's much more delayed. It was contested until relatively recently by mainstream medical establishment, but I think it's becoming more and more accepted now. And of course, some people say it's overplayed, right? Like everyone says they have a gluten allergy in certain parts of our countries, but it's taken seriously enough that, a gluten intolerance rather. Gluten allergies are pretty rare. Intolerance is certainly more common, but very debated about how common they are. Some people say the reaction to gluten is actually a reaction to something else. We'll get into that. Remind me if I miss it. So that's intolerances in a nutshell. Now, the last type I call sensitivities. Sometimes intolerances are referred to as sensitivities, but to me, the key distinction here is where the issue is not so much an immune response of either type or a histamine response, so much as it is the body being unable to break something down, which is toxic, but which other people's bodies may be able to deal with in a reasonable way. So I want to do a full list in a minute, but let's give one example. So that's very common. So like something like mercury, lead, cadmium, these kind of like very toxic heavy metals, these are toxic to everyone. Now, some people respond to it worse than others, but I wouldn't say anyone has like a mercury sensitivity because everyone has a pretty poor experience with mercury. Whereas say oxalates, which is this type of crystal which is found in a lot of plant foods, especially high in like chocolate and spinach, oxalates are like these little crystals which are often attached to or bound to nutrients. And for most people, they can eat spinach, they can eat chocolate. It's no big deal. But for a certain subset of people, it is. And so because they have a problem, so detoxification is a word that's kind of fraught with pseudoscience claims and stuff like that. So what is a toxin? A toxin is basically a poison, but as Paracelsus, sometimes called the father of medicine, said, the difference between a poison and a medicine is often dosage, right? And so ditto is the case with oxalate. And that, I think, is the crucial distinction. A certain amount of oxalate is fine. Your body actually produces oxalate, but beyond a certain amount can be an issue, depending on the person. And beyond a certain amount is an issue for everyone, but it's that level at which it becomes an issue that's the key. Whereas with things like mercury, lead, there is no safe amount. So that's really the crucial distinction. So sensitivity is where the safe amount for you is probably a lot less than average, at which point your body starts to have problems.
Thank you for each of those great distinctions, Elwin. That's very, very helpful. Can you give us some of the most common types of each one of those?
Yes. So in terms of allergies, we have pollens, often with grasses and from trees and stuff. Hay fever we talked about is a common, usually it's different types of grass. Animal fur, although actually we realize that a lot of the time it's actually animal saliva on the fur that we're reacting to. And so there's different foods, right? I think especially common is eggs, nuts, dairy, wheat, fish, especially shellfish, even, a lot of fruits and vegetables, different spices. Some people have issue with, nutmeg or whatever. So yeah, now drugs are usually referred to as allergies as well. Like they'll ask you if you go to hospital, do you have any allergies? And, generally they're talking about drugs. I'm not 100% sure on this because, again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not an expert. But my understanding is that actually, technically, a lot of those, or maybe all of those, would be classed as sensitivities. So it's not so much that your immune system's having a reaction to them; it's that it's the body's issue of breaking it down. But I'm no expert on that. I'm sure it's likely, at least in some cases, they are genuine allergies that your immune system is having a reaction to them. And of course, because drugs are often injected inside you, then it does make more sense that the immune system can go, wait a minute, this is not supposed to be here, and have an immune reaction to them. So yeah, drugs as well. Intolerances, gluten, as we talked about earlier, is a common one. Dairy, lactose. So the distinction there being that when we say a dairy allergy, we tend to mean the protein part of dairy. And in those cases, usually someone's okay with like ghee, maybe butter, because it doesn't have any protein. Lactose is the sugar part of dairy, and in that case, dairy which has had all the sugar removed, again, like maybe ghee, or maybe even some hard cheeses where it's really just protein and fat, the person might be okay with, even if they have a lactose intolerance. Eggs is a big one, soy, corn, nuts, and I was going to say with those other ones, notice how they are like the foods that we most commonly eat. Like the things that are in everything, especially, right? There's soy in everything, there's corn in everything, there's wheat in everything, there's egg in a lot of stuff. So yeah, that's often the case that that the immune system will react to something that we're having on an extremely habitual basis. And this is the issue of intolerances again, that you might be having something every single meal, maybe without realizing it, like in the case of soy. There's a lot of people who are not intentionally eating soy, but are still eating it every meal. And you don't even realize that the reason you're generally feeling sluggish, or the reason you got a rash or whatever it might be this intolerance. So yeah, we talked about nuts, seeds, less commonly than nuts, but still sometimes. And then lectins. And so lectins, there's a guy called Dr. Gundry who's done a lot of work in the last 10 years or so of really promoting awareness of this. And his book is good. He explains a lot about the immune system and why we would react to this. And so the basic theory behind lectins, in a nutshell, is that, so when we talked about allergies, you might have noticed every single thing that we talked about, it's the protein part of it that bothers you. And even most intolerances we talked about, it's the protein part that tends to bother you. And so the thing with lectins, so lectins are found in seeds. And when I say seeds, that includes nuts, beans, grains. And so the seed, obviously the reproductive part of the plant, right? The plant creates seeds, they go off, become new plants. And so the idea behind it is that plants don't want you to eat them in general, but they especially don't want you to eat their seeds, the thing that they use to reproduce. And so they put fairly high amounts of certain chemicals in there, which if you eat an excessive amount of it, the body reacts to it. That's, in a nutshell, the basic theory behind it. Although, again, Dr. Gundry will explain it in a lot more detail and better than me. But that's it in a nutshell. And so this is, where some people, it's becoming popular these days to eat like a paleo diet that talks about no grains, although I think paleo still allows nuts and seeds, so it's even more. Autoimmune protocol diet, that's another one that cuts out all nuts and seeds. And then, of course, the carnivore diet, the most extreme version, where you have no plant foods of any kind, because it is true that plants contain compounds in which are a poison to some degree, and which your body may, in certain cases, really struggle to break down, although in other cases it may be totally fine with breaking them down. But they are poisons. Now, of course, most animals also contain poisons in them because of what they're fed and the way they're treated and all the rest of it. So that's another conversation. I'm not being pro-carnivore, but I'm explaining, the rationale behind that particular, what seems an extreme diet, is you're not having any of those things that people tend to react to. And then there's sensitivities. And so again, this could be almost anything that your body has problem breaking down, but some of the ones that I'm familiar with that tend to have like communities around them, and a lot of people tend to struggle with them, are mycotoxins. So mycotoxins are created by molds. So, actually, I could have put mold with allergies, but yeah, fairly rare. Mycotoxins are the poisons created by molds kind of to fight each other and to fight other organisms, to fight fungus, to fight bacteria, to fight viruses. All these microorganisms are all kind of sometimes it's like a Game of Thrones, they're in symbiotic alliance with each other, they're warring with each other, they're betraying each other. It's like even penicillin is actually something that's created by mold to kill bacteria. And we were like, oh, that's handy. And we decided to use it. So mycotoxins are very toxic. They're so toxic that even the general mainstream governments of like my country and your country would class them, similar to asbestos and heavy metals. So they are actually highly toxic to everyone. But there are some people that it completely ruins the quality of life, stops their immune system working, puts them into this chronic inflammatory state where they're reacting to everything. And so generally, it's referred to as an important sensitivity. Oxalates, I just mentioned before. These sharp crystal type of things, if you look at them under the microscope, not a problem generally. Your body even makes its own out of various things, but some people struggle with it. It's one of the things that the carnivore group like to say. This is why you shouldn't eat any plant foods, because a lot of it has oxalates in and it's all, toxic. Salicylates, similar category as oxalate. It's in a lot of different plant foods. It's difficult for the body to break down. Salicylates are especially high in aspirin, actually. But that comes from a few different herbs. Wintergreen, I think, is one of them. So there's a lot of foods that contain salicylates. Some people are really bothered by it. And especially sinus issues, I believe, are often blamed on salicylates, although, of course, not always. Could be a chronic infection, many other things. Histamine. So I'll talk about histamine in a minute because that deserves its own category. But histamine is something that some people... So histamine causes allergy reactions, but histamine is something that is actually also contained in foods, particularly, pretty much exclusively aged foods. So like super fresh foods, this is one of the reasons why in a lot of cultures, like Asian cultures, they will only eat fresh foods. They're not really aware of toxicity and stuff as much, but they are super aware of freshness. And one of the reasons why it's bad to eat food that's not fresh is that it builds up histamine. Now, to be honest, though, that's true of all fermented foods that are supposed to be good for you, like cheese, fermented meat, sauerkraut, all of that kind of stuff. Any product of fermentation is going to have a lot of histamine. So again, not a problem if your body is able to break that histamine down, but it can be a real problem if it's not. And we'll talk about why you might not be able to when we get to that. Sulfur is another big one. So sulfites, you might have heard of that before. A lot of people have. They're in wine and stuff as a preservative, dried fruits often. But even sulfur, like it's a mineral. It's kind of interesting because it's a crucial mineral that every human being needs. But it's something that, because your body has a process of kind of breaking it down, and often it'll turn into sulfite, which is quite toxic. And then it can't do the conversion of sulfite into sulfate, which is what your body actually needs. And then you get this sulfite building up in your body. So that is not good. But again, that's a detoxification issue. It's your body. Just to explain detoxification in a nutshell in terms of what we're talking about, it's the process by which your body takes something poisonous and turns it into something less poisonous so it can then transport it out of the body. That's like the simple nutshell explanation. And so again, with the sulfur, we can see it goes wrong because in the intermediate, it turns into something more poisonous, then it can't turn it into the next thing, then it builds up, then it can create problems. And then the body struggles to get it out. Caffeine and alcohol, right? So these are substances that are problematic in their own right. But, some people are like, what's the big deal, right? And so, and it is true, some people have way more of an issue with, like for instance, breaking down the stress chemicals that caffeine will help to build up. But some people have problems dealing with caffeine full stop. So it has its own sensitivity. Alcohol is another thing that, again, there's a specific gene, there's a specific enzyme that called ALDH that if you do not have it working well, then you're really going to struggle to break down alcohol. And so it's a thing that genetically especially affects Southeast Asian people. I think something like 30% of the population. And so if they drink any alcohol, they have a histamine response. They go red straight away, and have some other unpleasant symptoms. But again, I call it sensitivity because it's the body not able to do that breaking down detoxification process. Tyramine and nickel are ones that I don't know a huge amount about. Tyramine is a specific type of amino acid that is similar to or can be turned into some of the other neurotransmitters. It can cause problems in certain people, and it's in a bunch of food again. Nickel is another mineral. We talked about sulfur, kind of similar, but the difference is sulfur is an essential mineral that you actually need, whereas nickel is not. So people often, react to jewelry and stuff, but it's actually in a bunch of foods as well. So that's another one. And then these are like borderline sensitivities. I'd also put glucose, fructose, FODMAP. So various types of sugars, various types of carbohydrates, the body actually can sometimes struggle to deal with. It can struggle to detoxify and break down. We talked in previous episodes about being able to handle carbohydrates in general. I wish we had genetic reports for each of the different types of carbohydrates, but unfortunately we don't. But there's definitely a community of people who, and especially like fructose is a common example. Like some people really struggle to break down fructose. It's something that needs to be detoxified in the liver. It's not something that your body can handle as well as glucose. But some people can't handle glucose. It's weird. There's like certain genetic anomalies and certain other factors, which we'll talk about a lot of them, which means that people are often like sensitive to these things.
I think you mentioned you're going to get into in a little bit the process of the body breaking these things down, because that's what I'm really, really curious about. So I don't want to jump ahead. But so I'll go into my my next question really would be, how can we test for these things so that we know what's going on? If potentially, especially something like an intolerance, is going to be slow, it's going to be over a period of time and we may not know. How can we test so that we can give our body the best possible chance for optimization?
Yeah, that's a good question. So genetics can really help. They can predict a lot. So out of the ones I've just listed, we have genetic reports for food allergies in general, which can then tell you, okay, I need to do a test of the most common ones. We also have eggs. We have wheat, which is called celiac disease, and we have dairy. And then we have gluten intolerance. We have lactose intolerance. And then we have mycotoxin sensitivity. We have oxalate. We have salicylate. We have histamine. We have caffeine. We have alcohol. So yeah, we've got a bunch. And so that's not conclusive, but the good thing is that it's cheap. Like doing that is like really, really inexpensive. Obviously, if you get the all reports bundle that contains over 200 reports, that's like it's a very small part of that. So then maybe it's the equivalent of $20-$30. But if you just go for the allergies bundle, then it's still, I don't know, depends on, I can't say, but it's less than $100. Let's put it that way. Maybe substantially less depending on whatever else is going on. Especially if you already have your raw genetic data that you've already used in another service. Like 23andMe or Ancestry.com. So compared to any other testing options, it's the cheapest. So it's a good starting place. And so what I found again and again in practice, like clinically, is that we can start with that because it's cheap. And then we can go, your test results are showing that you have an issue with lactose, or your test results are showing that you have an issue with oxalates, or whatever, right? Just random examples. And then you can go off and check.
Beautiful. Great. Now, it's a wonderful place to start. So how accurate are these tests?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we, claim 99.7% accuracy. I would say, based on my experience, that is the case. And I say when we claim, I'm talking about like, statistically, but just in my, personal clinical experience, that is the case. But however, with a few caveats. So I want to give the caveats because I want to be super, honest and transparent. So first of all, we have to be clear the genetic results, you're going to get exactly the same results, or very close to anyway, like irrespective of age. So meaning if you're 20, it's very possible that a lot of different things have not shown up for you yet, even if you have a high risk score for them. Now, in the case of allergies and intolerances and sensitivities, that's not as much the case, but it still is. Like when I was 20, I was not aware of any of these food allergies. Maybe I already had them, but I was completely oblivious to them. So That's one of the things. It can definitely give a false negative. So what I mean by that is it could say you don't have it, and then you still actually have the symptoms. And now this was actually the case for me. So this was really interesting for me. When I said I've been in that experience several times throughout my life, and more recently a couple of years ago, where my body was reacting to almost everything. And this was, a very real and significant reaction. This is not, is it? This is like ruining the quality of my life. And so when I did this test, I was really skeptical or surprised and then skeptical to see that it said I had almost no food intolerances, allergies, sensitivities, even though I knew from my practical experience that I was reacting to all these things. And I'm not saying this is the case for you watching, but so then I actually did some intolerance and allergy testing, both. Like a very broad spectrum of, a couple of hundred different things to be allergic to and intolerant to. And I was even more surprised to see that it said I only had a few allergies and intolerances, and they were very mild. And then, it's especially because my wife is on a similar journey with me, as I said, and so she did the same test, and she had they give you a score out of 100 in this particular test. She had loads of things that she had a 100 score for. And yet she was fairly unaware that she was reacting to these foods and other things. And then I had maybe a few that was as high as 20 of, really no big deal. And yet I had this massive reaction. And so that didn't make sense to me. So that, and I'm never trying to make excuses for things. I'm always trying to work it out. So I was like, oh, maybe this is not true. This doesn't work or whatever. But what I eventually discovered is the reason why I was having such strong reactions to these things was not so much because I had the immune response, it's because I had sensitivities, because my body wasn't detoxifying properly, which is a whole different conversation we can maybe talk about if we do a detoxification episode. But I've already talked about how I had lead. I also had mycotoxins, so both of those were tested and proven. Both of those will mess with your body's ability to detoxify in general. So that's this short preview, I guess. But more importantly, I would say when it comes to why I was reacting to all these foods, and I never had hay fever, cat hair used to bother me, it didn't anymore. It felt like I was pretty good, except for all these foods. And then of course I found out I had SIBO and SIFO, which stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth and small intestine fungal overgrowth. And so when you have bacterial, and the type of bacterial overgrowth I had was a sulfur eating bacteria, the most difficult to deal with out of the three, of course. And so basically what it was is every time I would eat all these different type of foods, it would get eaten or reacted to by the organisms inside me rather than it. So it wasn't my immune system being bothered by it. It was my immune system maybe reacting to the fact I was feeding or aggravating, irritating. Say if I ate garlic, I would feel terrible. But then garlic is killing attacking these organisms, and then they create loads of gas, they create lots of toxins. They, when you attack any kind of microorganism, it tends to respond in kind, like we talked about. They've got all this biochemical warfare going on. So turned out the genetic test was right. The blood test was right. I didn't have allergies and intolerances. And sure enough, and it took a long time, but finally started to get these chronic infections under control, then my reaction to all these foods went down more and more and more. So that's just one example, maybe a bit long example, but one example of how you could get a false negative. It tells you don't have an issue with a food. You still have an issue with food, right? So if every time you eat something or touch something or whatever, you get sick, just because our genetic reports tell you that you don't have an issue with it, doesn't mean you don't have an issue with it, but it may mean that you don't have an issue with it for the reason that you think you do. And then it can happen the other way as well. So a person can take the test and it tells them they have an allergy or an intolerance or a sensitivity, and they don't. They really don't have an issue with eating that food or whatever. And in that case, what I generally notice is the person is either young and usually they're really on top of their health, right? They're already doing a lot of the kind of stuff that we talk about. And so for that reason, they have addressed these underlying cause issues enough that we're going to get into because they are generally healthy. Maybe they're already aware of some of the stuff we're going to talk about today and they're already doing it. And so therefore, they are not expressing that intolerance or sensitivity or whatever, even though they have the genetic tendency for it. Now, that's less common with allergies. I will give you that. That's much more the case of intolerances or sensitivities. Allergies, you can definitely make them better, but you generally don't completely remove them because they do have a genetic component to it, and they're more serious. So even if you reduce the impact they have by 90%, if that's possible for you, 10% of an allergy is still quite a strong response. So it's still something.
This is a great place to start, like you said, with the genetic testing. I know, it's been very helpful for me, and by looking at things. But and also the other part is like what you said is that this can be a tendency, but there's also can be other factors to look at, whether it's something that is how can I say, showing up in your life or potentially not. But you did mention that the genetic reports are a really great place to start. What else? What else can somebody do beyond that to look deeper?
Yeah, so great question. So again, genetic tests, obviously we make them available to people, but you can do it at other places as well. But as I said, the main reason I like it is because it saves money. If you got all the money in the world and not a lot of time, you can skip straight to the next step if you want, which is just testing for everything. So blood tests are really good for allergies. As I said, even the mainstream medical people will hook you up on that, if you've shown that you've already had a reaction to it. Although if you generally want to get an idea of what you could have a reaction to, you can certainly do self-testing like I did. Intolerances, blood tests as well. Now, again, I would recommend for this that you actually go to a practitioner. I've seen a lot of the self-serve intolerance tests, and I found them to be extremely unreliable. So I would go to a naturopathic doctor, a functional medicine doctor, someone like that, and they will help you to get tested with a reputable company. I wish I could recommend someone to you who I knew was reputable without that, but unfortunately I can't. Again, feel free to recommend in the comments section on YouTube. If you stand by that this company is totally accurate, we'd be happy to see that, but I can't say for sure. So that's for the intolerances, allergies. For the sensitivities, it kind of varies. So I talked about mycotoxins, for instance. Oxalates, sulfites. With all of those, you can do a urine test for it. With like histamine, it's a blood test. Although histamine is kind of transient, it is a hormone, but it's also a neurotransmitter, so it can vary widely. So it's not super reliable, but the test is available, and you can do it. And then with some of them, like with the alcohol, for instance, the genetic thing really is the best, is to see what's going on with your ALDH gene. That's probably the best thing that I know that will actually give you a decent indication. But having said all of that, the absolute best way of testing, especially if you do not have any money, even for genetic testing, then good news, there is a better way than anything I've just said. And that's actually the classic exclusion diet approach. So this is basically, and diet, I mean, this is also true for inhalants, right? Like, if you think you might have hay fever, stay indoors for a week. Have an air purifier running in every room that you're in, and don't have any windows or doors open for more than a second or two, and see if you feel better, right? But as you can probably gather from that description, with foods, it's a lot easier, right? All you do is just don't eat the food or anything containing the thing. If you feel like it's, something more general like oxalates, you got to avoid all the high oxalate foods. Look up a list. If you feel like it might be histamine, you got to avoid all the high histamine foods, etc., right? Now, when I say that's all you have to do, again, for some people, this is like the end of the world, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, that's not as easier said than done for some.
And so this is interesting. And now, obviously we can joke about this, but I actually would say the more attached you are to a certain thing, like say you have a genetic test and it goes, you have a high chance for sensitivity to gluten. Again, it's always risk scores, right? Nothing is certain with genetics. We're just giving you a percentage chance of risk. But if it says you have an extremely high chance, say top 2%, something like that, there's a good chance that you got it, right? So, but you don't want to go without it. So here's the thing. The not wanting to go without it is actually a sign that you have an issue with it.
Can you go, I was going to say, can you go a little deeper into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so the reason for that is, so we can easily get all kind of maudlin about like, oh, why do I keep getting into relationships with people who are abusive towards me? Like, why do I keep like being drawn to foods that are abusive towards me internally? It's kind of like the same thing in a way, right? Like, so I use that as a, hopefully slightly humorous, although obviously it's a serious subject. Like example, I think I heard a health teacher talk about this long ago. He said, there's lots of foods that I love, but they don't love me back. And so I just have to accept that. And I guess maybe that's the case of, if you're a very loving person, if you try to love everyone, you eventually have to learn the lesson, like, do love everyone, right? Don't become cold and cynical and all the rest of it. But you have to understand some people are not going to love you back, and you just have to have boundaries to keep them out of your life or minimize their input into your life. And so it's kind of the same with foods. You may love that food, but it doesn't love you back. We already gave an example for that, like with lectins, right? You may love wheat, but like that wheat plant does not love you eating all its seeds. And it's put something in there called gluten, which is a lectin, which is kind of poisonous to you in the sense that your immune system reacts to it and acts as if you've been poisoned, even though in fact it's something that could be harmless if you didn't have that immune response. But you do, so it's kind of like a poison. But here's the thing. Why would we be attracted to a poison? Well, why do we drink alcohol? I think most of us acknowledge that's a poison, right? Again, we could argue that based on dosage, it can be a medicine as well. My understanding is that traditionally it was actually used as a carrier for medicine. So a lot of the time it would be, you'd have a bunch of other worms. You'd have a bunch of other herbs with it, like wormwood, for instance, which we still do. Absinthe, right? Absinthe is when they use alcohol as a carrier for wormwood into the body. So when you add like a bunch of different herbs and the active components that alcohol draws out of those herbs into the body, it will go straight into the bloodstream and go straight into the cells much more quickly than if we eat them. So yes, alcohol has some benefit in some cases. And of course, you could argue, people who eat, people who have a small amount of alcohol, very small amount, but a small amount per week, are shown to have slightly better health outcomes than people who don't. I personally don't think that's resveratrol or whatever. I think that it's just that stress is such a huge thing when it comes to health. And so people who maybe just are easygoing and occasionally have a little drink once a week are probably the type who have less stress. And so therefore they have better health outcomes. But that's my speculation. Regardless, the bottom line is we all know alcohol is a poison. And so why do we like it? Because it has a certain effect, right? Alcohol does a bunch of things. I won't go into alcohol too much, but it's ditto with all these foods that we're attracted to, right? So any food that has an immune response will also have a nervous system sympathetic stress response. So we talked about this a lot in the stress episode. When you're kind of in a dorsal vagal state a lot of the time, when you're kind of depressed, shut down, low energy, life doesn't really feel like it's that great, to get a rush of stress, to get a sympathetic rush, feels like an upgrade. And so every time you take something that is poisonous to you, even if it's that immune system response, it feels like an upgrade. You get a little rush from it, right? This is certainly true of stimulants, right? Coffee, chocolate, amphetamine, cocaine, all of these things, they all give you a rush. They're all like stimulating. They give you a stress chemical rush. And this is very appealing to the vast majority of people. So that's one of the reasons. But the other thing is that, some of these other foods have an effect on other systems, right? So there's a bunch of different foods that work on the endocannabinoid system. There's a bunch of different foods that work on the opiate system. There's a bunch of different foods that work on the serotonergic system, dopaminergic system. So all of these feel-good chemicals can be released by these common intolerances, like especially gluten, dairy, soy. I think they're the primary culprits, actually. They can really stimulate the feel-good chemicals in us. And so we really get off on them. And so, that's why we can feel, oh, no, you're trying to take, it's like if you say to an alcoholic, you'd be better off not drinking. They're like, well, go away, or maybe at best they might say, well, that sounds good in theory, but I don't want to stop, And so that's often the response you get if you say to someone, why don't you try just not having gluten for 10 days, something like that. But anyway, we'll assume that your symptoms are bad enough, that you're motivated enough to at least give it a chance. And giving it a chance, I think, is an important distinction. I always say to people, this does not mean you can't have it forever, right? A lot of people who drink, unless they really are alcoholics, they can actually go for a week or two without drinking, right? Every now and then. There's like an ancient tradition, even though it seems like our ancestors, drank a lot of alcohol, they would do like Lent, for instance, right? Or Ramadan or whatever, right? They have like a month-ish off. And so that's all I'm saying. It's not, you can't have it ever again. It's just have a break from it and see what happens. And so the general thing with the elimination diet is you have a bit of a break. A week is okay. 10 days, 2 weeks is better. 3 weeks is definite. But even a week, And then here's the crucial thing. You have none of it during that time. Not a little bit, none. And then you have a lot. So let's say your thing is gluten. When you finished, celebrate with, a pizza, with a loaf of bread, with a sandwich on the side. Like, have a bunch of gluten. And then observe how you feel. And of course, you should have been observing how you feel without the thing. But often when you first stop having a thing, like, it takes the body a little bit to adjust. And so you don't necessarily feel the benefits. Some people do. Some people are like, my depression went away straight away. My skin rash went away straight away. My sinus issue went away straight away. Great. But not everyone has that response. And even then, if you love gluten, you might, and I'm picking on gluten here, but it's true for everything I said before. If you love gluten, you might be like, oh, it might be a coincidence. It might be a placebo effect, which is very strong. We talked about that in the last episode. So then you have it again in a large amount and then wait 3 days, right? Because of the 3-day rule that we talked about, to see if you have those symptoms come back or if they never went away, are they worse? Because the interesting thing is, when you don't have it for a while, your tolerance goes away and you have a worse response. And so that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that initial response. Just like even if you drink a lot of alcohol, if you stop having it for a month and then you drink alcohol, you'll be a lightweight again, Maybe like I used to smoke a loads, like tobacco, and you can smoke deep drags, no problem. But then if you don't smoke for a month and you smoke again, you're like, right? Like you get that actual natural response. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the equivalent of that, like, smoking for the first time or alcohol for the first time, like having it for the first time. And if you start noticing those symptoms coming back, again, not straight away, but within 3 days, then that's a real indication. And then I would suggest stop again. But here's the thing, and this is why I want to share this with the world. This is why it's, a priority, one of the first episodes. It's because I remember getting to a point, like, I remember my mother saying to me, like, she really believed in a lot of alternative health stuff, and she had cancer several times. And the last time she had cancer, she went to one of these alternative doctors. She went to mainstream medicine as well, but one of these alternative. And he said, here's a list of all the foods you shouldn't eat. And then I found her eating them anyway. And I said, what are you doing? And she goes, and again, I was eating all food then. I was not restricting anything. I was not like judging, like I was not anti-gluten. I would eat, like my diet consisted of like gluten, chocolate, and dairy. So it wasn't coming from that place, but it was just from but I thought you said, it was like that. And she was like, oh, but if I can't eat the food that I want, what's the point of being alive? Now, I have to say I was full of judgment about that. But I kind of got to a point, it's karma, of like when I could only eat like less than 5 foods without reacting to it, almost like, what is the point of being alive? Like it is really demoralizing when there's hardly anything that you can eat without feeling sick. It feels like it feels like the universe, life, or whatever, God is not on your side when you can't even nourish yourself, or when you can't even breathe air, right? I haven't been through that, but it's like an equivalent, And so it's really, really, really important at that time, I think, to have hope. And so this is kind of what I want to give. Like I said earlier, certainly in extreme cases, maybe it will never completely go away. But if you're in that similar boat to what I'm talking about, or even if you're not, if you're just someone who's like, I can't imagine living without gluten forever, I wanted to say, so this is the point that I got to. I got to where I could only eat a handful of foods. I was reacting to everything. And I remember the first time it happened, I was like 27, something like that. And I went to a library. This is before I discovered the internet. Yes, I'm that old. And found a book about how to deal with this. And they basically were like, here's a handful of foods that tend to be not a problem with everyone. I think rice was one of them. Rice is one of those things that hardly anyone reacts to, and a couple of other things. And they were like, every third day you can have it, you've got to cycle between them. I was like, this is miserable. Like, there's only a handful of foods I can eat, and I can only eat them once every 3 days. I was like, I do not want this to be the rest of my life, right? And so it was really that, actually, that more than anything, I know maybe I've told a different story before about, suffering with other stuff, and that was also true. But that was really like a breaking point of like, I do not want to live this way. And I was like determined to find how I could not just manage the situation, but actually overcome it. And so if you're at that point right now, and that's why you're watching this video, perfect. You're in exactly the right place. That's who this is for. If you're not in such a desperate place yet, then I hope you still get value from it. And I hope you never get to that desperate place. But sometimes we need to get to, a terrible place before we're willing to do the drastic thing, like cutting all this stuff out or whatever else. But I hope you don't have to get to that stage, right? I hope that wherever you're at right now, this is I don't want to get to that. And let's look at actually what are these root causes.
We're going to take a quick break to share with you one of our amazing sponsors, Genetic Insights. What makes Genetic Insights uniquely valuable is that they test over 83 million different variants, which guarantees a 99.7% accuracy on all of their DNA reports. With over 100 reports available, you get comprehensive insights into what your DNA is telling you about how to optimize your health today and in the future. I found reviewing my results to be incredibly accurate and applying some of the recommendations, which are personalized to your individual DNA, to be extremely helpful for me and my family. I also loved how easy it was to upload my raw DNA data that I already had from previously using Ancestry.com, because Genetic Insights supports uploading raw data from all major platforms. To get your health reports, go to geneticinsights.co and get 20% off today by using coupon code Rejuvenate. Remember that supporting our sponsors supports our podcast, which allows us to keep sharing this important information with you free of cost. So, go get your Genetic Insights health reports by going to geneticinsights.co and use coupon code Rejuvenate for 20% off today. No, absolutely. Well, before we touch on that, I just had one other quick question about the elimination diet. I know we were specifically talking just about gluten in that instance, but let's say it might be a few other things. When you decide to do an let me say that again. When you decide to do the elimination diet, should you break it down to so it's a very base, there's only a few things that you're eating so that, no okay. Yeah.
No, sorry. That was the position that I ended up in,
right,
because I didn't address any of this stuff until it got really bad. But absolutely not. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. No, what you actually want to do, let's say you get a list of a few different suspects that you think might be the case from a genetic report or from whatever else, or blood test. You want to do one at a time. Now, if you're really suffering and you just want to be better and you're highly motivated, you could try cutting them all out. And that's kind of the path that I went down and would go down, because I'm quite extreme. But if anything, it's slightly less scientific, right? So if you're like, oh God, I don't want to cut everything out, fine, don't. Just try one thing, try your top target, your top suspect first. And then, because otherwise, if you cut everything out, you're actually not going to know, when I say it's not scientific, you're not going to know why you feel better if you feel better, right? You're not going to know what it is. So if you don't want to do more than one thing at a time, congratulations. I mean, it's a slightly slower way to do it, but it's a more precise way to do it. You can, work out one at a time. Do I have an issue with this? And then go on to the next thing.
Wonderful. So now that we know what we may potentially have an issue with, what causes it?
Okay, so with allergies and intolerances, it is all about the immune system, right? So that's a key thing. Now, I'm going to do a little bit on the immune system. I'll do a recap, but this is where I said to check out the previous episodes that we did on chronic pain, because I really go into the immune system as it relates to inflammation in detail there. I will recap here in a bit. But yeah, that's like a key factor. Now, the other thing that we didn't talk about in any previous episodes that is also really important, an aspect of the immune system, which I mentioned earlier, is that hormone and neurotransmitter histamine, okay? So we have a genetic predisposition to tagging certain things as a threat. We've already covered that, and we've got reports for that. But what about the general tendency, right? So first of all, not everyone has the same amount of histamine in their body. Not everyone has the same tendency towards histamine. And so this is regulated by something called the HNMT gene. And so some people have that more active and some people have that less active. And so this is one of the explanations as to why some people are more reactive generally, which I'd still put myself in that category, even though I didn't have specific food and other intolerances and allergies. I had a generally more reactive to things system, which was more easily exacerbated. And so that's one tendency. Now, we don't have a report for that precisely, but I would say our food allergies report it's largely based on that gene. It's based on a bunch of others. We don't do reports for individual genes. We prefer to do it based on things that you actually care about, like whether you have a food allergy. But yeah, that's one of the things that we definitely look at with that. So another thing Actually, let's explain histamine. So it's a hormone and neurotransmitter. It is stimulating. That's one of the things about it, which is why when you take an antihistamine, what happens to you? You feel drowsy, right? So there are the more drowsy and the less drowsy types, I know, but the drowsy type is the basic type. The less drowsy type is where they've like modified it. And they're all drowsy to some degree, right? So if you want like as much energy and motivation and drive as possible, and you want to reduce your histamine as much as possible, realize that you are like, these are two opposite goals, right? So be aware of that. So histamine is stimulating, increases stomach acid. And so, we talked in digestion, how lack of stomach acid can be an issue. So can excess. I would say it's one of the main factors. So if you tend to run high on histamine, you'll probably tend to have an excess of stomach acid and vice versa. It causes most of the symptoms, certainly of allergies, and I would argue a lot of them of intolerances, although that's less well studied. Sinus issues, itching, headache, all of those kind of things. So in terms of the mucus and the blockage and stuff like that, that is really your body trying to push stuff out, right? And so that is largely created by the histamine response. Histamine is a vasodilator, meaning that it will expand the blood vessels, but also meaning that experientially it will make you feel hot. And so histamine is really, really correlated with heat. I feel like this is one of the reasons why allergies and stuff often get worse in the summer. It's not only because there's more pollen around and stuff. You might notice on a particular hot day, the symptoms are always worse. So histamine creates heat, but histamine is also exacerbated by heat. Now, that's always been my practical clinical experience, but I actually had to research when I was doing the notes for this episode. Wait a minute, is there any actual studies to support that? Yeah, actually, there's a bunch that heat absolutely does increase histamine concentration in the muscles and various different parts of the body. So yes, heat does actually stimulate increased amount of histamine. Histamine also increases erection capacity, by the way. So again, if you have erectile dysfunction and you are trying to deal with lowering histamine, again, realize that these are two opposite goals because it's vasodilatory. So people taking, I saw a study about this, people who take a lot of antihistamines are more likely to have erectile dysfunction issues. But yeah, so, if we look at the ancient systems of health that we're not as, aware of all the chemistry, but they would say this is simply a situation of heat, right? And so it's interesting that heat really is a key aspect of it. We talk about inflammation, and flam is like the word flame, right? And often inflammation is correlated to heat and redness, right? And it's actually the same with a histamine response. It's correlated to heat, right? And redness and swelling, right? Obviously, the extreme thing is where your throat swells up and you can't breathe, the anaphylactic shock thing. But yeah, so heat, redness, swelling are histamine and inflammatory things, and they are absolutely correlated to allergies and intolerances, and to some degree, sensitivities as well. So histamine is generally stored in these things called mast cells, which are like these kind of silos, I guess is the word, like throughout the body, where the body has this histamine stored and ready for action, ready for when it's necessary, ready for when it's needed. And there's this thing called mast cell activation syndrome, which is basically where you were in that position that I talked about earlier, where your body's reacting to everything. And so the theory about that, and again, I wanted to check this when I did notes for this because I wanted to see how mainstream it had become. It looks like it's becoming more and more mainstream. Now, again, often medicine only focuses on the most extreme cases, but there's absolutely a recognition that some people have this hyper-responsive tendency to have their mast cells become activated and have histamine flood into the system, which then creates all of these things that we would call allergy symptoms, right? And if you think about it, it's not that similar from illness. If you think about like the feeling of a cold or something, like a standard cold, and you think about the feeling of like hay fever, there's a lot of overlap, right? In fact, some people even confuse one for the other. So that's because it is an immune response, right? The only difference is what it's responding to, but it's the same basic idea. So one of the genetic tendencies is to have a lot of this histamine, but another of these genetic tendencies is to release it easily. So you've got these genes called HRH1, 2, 3, and 4. if you have one of them that's kind of, or any one of them that's upregulated, then you'll have more of a tendency to have this mast cell activation syndrome or just have allergies in general, where it takes less for the body to go into panic mode and those mast cells to start releasing this histamine and overloading the system with histamine and causing all the symptoms. Now, another thing related to histamine is we do have it in our intestines. We create it in our intestines. As I said, if we eat foods high in histamine, that will add histamine to our intestines. And so there's this gene called DAO, D-A-O. And so that should break down the histamine in the intestines. And when that DAO enzyme is underactive, then there will be the buildup of histamine in the intestines. Now, of course, anything in the intestines can and probably will get into the bloodstream. And so a lot of the symptoms are the same. But yeah, so that's another factor. Now, the DAO one, I can tell you how to address that because that's the easiest. I mean, other than a general health thing, that's something you can actually just supplement. You can buy it. It's not super cheap, but if you are sure you have a histamine intolerance, or even if you have enough money to just try it, then you can take that. So that's an alternative to removing all the high histamine food. If you don't want to eat only ever fresh food, then you can add, you can take a tablet with the DAO enzyme in, and that will help if that's the issue. And that's something you can test for as well, your level of that. And then another thing, so one of the things that breaks down the histamine molecule is actually the same thing that breaks down alcohol, and that's that ALDH gene as well. So if you have a tendency to react to alcohol, you're probably going to have a tendency to have high levels of histamine in general and be more reactive in general because the body has an issue breaking down that histamine.
What other non-genetic factors would there be that speak to the body having difficulties breaking down these allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities?
Yeah, it's a good question. So those are the kind of technical genetic ones, but let's look at the practical ones. And I'll rush through these a bit, some of them, because we talked about them so much in previous episodes. But simply anything that increases the inflammatory tendency of the immune system, right? Which we've talked about a lot already. But I'll talk about a few of the key ones that are relevant to this, that there's evidence and research that they're relevant. So gut inflammation, right? Gut inflammation will then lead to leaky gut generally, or increased intestinal permeability, if you want to use a term that your doctor will actually recognize. And then more stuff, especially bigger molecules, will be able to get into the bloodstream and create problems. So say if you did have histamine building up in your intestines, and then you had gut inflammation, and then you had leaky gut, more of it's going to get into bloodstream, you have even more histamine in the bloodstream. So that's like one example. But in general, it's more, if you have chronic inflammation anywhere, especially in areas big and important as the whole intestinal tract, then the immune system is dysregulated and you're more likely to have this reactive response. Any strong, hard to deal with toxin, we've already talked about this, heavy metals, we use, as an example, mycotoxins, pesticides, that can dysregulate the immune system completely, stop it working correctly, and it can go, it specifically for whatever reason, stops the regulatory part of the immune system working correctly, it increases the inflammatory part. Even a relentless stream of normal toxins, right? And so this is why I said people who have a generally healthy lifestyle are more likely to not have symptoms, even if they have a genetic predisposition to allergies and intolerances. So, all the usual: sugar, alcohol, traffic fumes, if you smoke, if you drink a lot of tap water, especially in a bad area, all of that stuff, right? The water you drink, the air you breathe, the food you eat, all of it. And a lot of people focus on food, but actually the water you drink, air you breathe, super important as well. And again, we'll talk about that more when we do a toxins episode. And then, endotoxin, we talked about that a lot in the digestive one, but that's another thing. And the other, endotoxin is the main one, but all the toxins created by a chronic infection, even if it's mild in the digestive tract, will absolutely dysregulate the immune system, can make you much more reactive. I would say also there's less evidence for this scientifically, but practically liver blockage. If you have that tendency to sludge in the liver, if you have a tendency for bile to not be flowing freely, then I've seen over and over again that a person is more immune reactive. And specifically when they address that, they become less immune reactive. As I said, I don't think science is super clear on exactly how that works, although I have some theories that I'll get to when we get to cures. Other issues, all the hormonal stuff we've talked about before. So endorphins are huge. I would refer you to, I talked about that in detail in the chronic pain one, but endorphins are one of, if not the main regulators of the immune system. If they're all messed up for various reasons, which I talked about in detail in that episode, that can create this problem where we're hyperreactive to things. Endocannabinoids, indirectly, but I have not seen the same amount of evidence that increasing endocannabinoids helps with allergies and intolerances. So I definitely put endorphins over them. Thyroid can be absolutely huge. If you have a suboptimal level of thyroid, usually it's that way around, then that can absolutely mean your immune system is not working correctly and all of these problems can come. It could be as easy as resolving that if that's your issue. Thymus, a little bit more tricky to resolve, but we talked about that a lot in the hormone episode and the peptide episodes, that generally your thymus gland will, as you get older, inevitably, so thyroid is more dependent. Some people can still have a healthy thyroid gland at the age of 60. Not many people have a very good thymus gland by the age of 60. It's like really shriveled and withered away. So we never have such a great immune system as a result of that. And so supporting the thymus gland with thymus peptides, is potentially a thing. And supporting the thymus gland in general, because still all the usual stuff, lifestyle stuff, health stuff will help the thymus to work better. Cortisol deficiency. So cortisol is a very powerful anti-inflammatory. I've not seen the research for this, but I also believe, and I don't think it is, I don't think there's any chance it'll be disproven. It's also really good for reducing histamine as well. In fact, if you've seen research about that, stick it in the comments in YouTube. I'd be interested to see it. I'm convinced of it, even though I haven't seen it yet. But if I'm wrong, that it works because it's so powerful as an anti-inflammatory. So cortisol is the stress hormone. These days, it's almost like demonized a lot by marketers. Even I've been guilty of this during an ignorant phase of not realizing that it's not that cortisol is, I always knew cortisol wasn't bad, but it's not as if like the lower the better, right? What cortisol is actually necessary and required. It's just, as always, you want the optimal amount. And so when it comes to reducing inflammation, and as I say, I think reducing histamine, high end of optimal is actually what you want, not low end of optimal. But you don't want it that way all the time. So it's those spikes of cortisol. But there's a caveat to that. A lot of things that increase cortisol also increase heat. So sure, if you go out running in the bright sunshine in the summer, that will increase cortisol, but I would say it also will increase histamine. So especially, I think this is, I'm jumping ahead a bit here, but I think this is where cold therapy, cryotherapy, even cold shower, cold bath, all the rest of it is super effective and helpful. Wim Hof has done a great job, not just to popularize it in the public mind, but also to allow himself to be submitted to lots of scientific testing to prove how effective his method is, and to stimulate high levels of cortisol and other stress chemicals, either with the kind of breathing that he talks about, or with cold exposure. He's proven in both cases that it significantly lowers inflammation. And again, as I said, I haven't seen the research, but I would suspect it also, well, I've seen the research that says the heat increases histamine. I haven't seen that the cold reduces it, but to me, it's obvious, and again, practically it works. So that cold exposure will absolutely reduce inflammation. I strongly speculate that it would also reduce histamine. And so, to get that cortisol while not overheating, I think that is like the golden key to reducing it in the short term. Now, I say in the short term, but of course, if you're in a habit of like every morning getting up, doing some of that cortisol stimulating breathing, and then doing a cold shower, then every day you're spiking your cortisol, and every day you're lowering your level of inflammation. And I would say probably histamine as well. So if that's like a thing that you do every day, maybe even twice a day, then that will start to put you in a generally low inflammatory state, right? So even though it's an immediate thing, I would say that it's also a strategy which is potentially good long term. Now, I talked about cortisol before in hormones, so I won't repeat it, but that's not necessarily a good idea for everyone. And some people do the Wim Hof method, do not feel better. They actually feel worse. So I talked about why that may be. There's other potential theories, but I talked about why that may be in the hormone episode. So not always a good thing to do, but definitely worth a try if you have this issue. Because if you have this issue, if you are very reactive to a lot of stuff, you probably are more on the high level of inflammation and histamine level. Well, you are. You're not necessarily on the low end of cortisol, but they are actually, even opposite. Like cortisol will raise blood pressure, histamine will actually lower blood pressure. So it's a good bet that raising cortisol is probably going to be a good idea for you. And certainly cold is going to be a good idea in practice. Like when this works better for allergies, I would say, than intolerances, because intolerances are more general and long lasting. But if you're in the grip of an allergy, to literally get into the cold, you can start to feel better like very quickly within minutes. It's very helpful. Testosterone is another one that will dysregulate the immune system if you're a man, especially, and you have very low levels. Serotonin and melatonin. So this is a little bit indirect, but I've seen studies that show that raising them will help. So I thought it's worth mentioning. But again, so histamine is a stimulating neurochemical. We probably, if you've had allergies, if you're watching this, you probably had the experience of not being able to sleep because of the irritation that you get with allergies. And so calming neurotransmitters like serotonin, especially, the other ones too, and then sleeping neurotransmitters like melatonin are important. And I would say on the other side, if you have a tendency to run low in serotonin, run low in melatonin, to have sleep issues, you are more likely to have this issue, because it's all like a balance, right? It's like this one factor is not going to be the key, but if you're really low in a lot of the calming stuff and high in a lot of the stimulating stuff, you're way likely to have this problem. Now, is it always that simple? No, because we just used the cortisol example, right? Sometimes even the stimulating things are balanced against each other in a different way, but certainly calming yourself down will reduce the symptoms of allergies and intolerances to some degree, and also sensitivities for a different reason.
Great. Can you go into a little bit more about sensitivities? I mean, within these deficiencies and then the body's inability to break these things down, would that be what's causing what you refer to as sensitivities?
Yes. So yes and no. So yes, indirectly. So basically, the detoxification system, the system that breaks down, more toxic elements into less toxic elements and then transports them out of the body, is in a way diametrically opposed to the immune system. So the immune system job is to find things that are not supposed to be in the body and, kill them if necessary, if they're living, and then get them out, right? But it's more like honed to dealing with living organisms. And then the detoxification system is more about dealing with the non-living organisms, maybe the byproducts of those organisms, like we talked about endotoxin and mycotoxins and stuff, but with the non-living organisms. Now, the approach to them is different. Here's the key distinction. So one of the main arsenals that your immune system has in its tool of weapons to deal with these organisms is oxygen. It actually creates hydrogen peroxide, for instance, to kill a lot of different organisms. So very, very few, I don't know if there's any pathogenic organisms that thrive in a high oxygen environment. So the immune system, very broadly speaking, I mean, it's incredibly complicated, but incredibly broadly speaking, is pro-oxidant. It creates oxidants. It actually creates free radicals, which then kill those organisms. So it's this idea of, yes, hydrogen peroxide is a poison. If you actually accidentally drink it, you need to go to an emergency room. But in a very small quantity to fight a very specific organism, your body actually creates it itself, right? So again, it's the difference between poison and medicine is dosage. But when your body is in that mode of killing organisms, or even of thinking that it's killing organisms, right? Because that's a lot of the problem with an allergy or an intolerance, is your immune system's reacting to something because it thinks it's a foreign invader, even though it's not, even though it's just a protein. Because it kind of tags everything based on proteins. That's why it's, vast majority is protein that are genuine allergies and genuine intolerances. And so it identifies them based on proteins. So when the body is attacking what it perceives to be an invader, accurate or not, it's in a pro-oxidant state. Now, the whole detoxification system, again, incredibly complicated, again, a lot to it. But in a nutshell, it is an antioxidant system, right? Some of the prime components of the detoxification system are like glutathione and superoxide dismutase, these kind of things that get rid of free radicals. And so generally the body doesn't like to have both in a state of high activity at the same time. And so my understanding and experience, and there's research about this, but I don't think this is proven yet, but my understanding is that the reason a lot of the time why someone has a lot of sensitivities is because they have an elevated immune response, an inflammatory response, maybe a histamine response. And so when that is in high alert, then the detoxification system is not working in optimal capacity. So that's one reason, because they work kind of in an opposite way. Now, another reason is because there's only so much energy and focus to go around, right? So when we're in a stress state, we talked about this a lot in the stress episode, when we're in a sympathetic state or a dorsal vagal state, we don't actually have a huge amount of energy available for either activity, right? If you're running away from someone trying to kill you or something trying to kill you, you need to not be putting your energy into fighting an infection, at least for a few seconds stroke minutes, right? You need to not be putting a lot of energy into detoxifying and dealing with all the poisons in you. You need to be putting all your energy into your muscles and your heart and your lungs to get the hell away or to defeat the thing that's attacking you, right? And so these three systems, so if your immune system, if your nervous system is in a chronically stimulated state, which histamine will help to do, right? It's a feedback loop. If you're stressed all the time, or a lot of the time, too much of the time, then neither of those systems will work very well. The immune system is more likely to become dysregulated. And then if your dysregulated immune system is like constantly reacting to things that are not really a threat as if they're a threat, or it's constantly trying to deal with chronic infections, we'll get to that in a minute, then, or both, then the poor detoxification system takes a real back seat. It's not getting much of a look in there. I mean, obviously, I'm being silly. It's doing what it has to do, but it's doing what it absolutely has to do as best as it can, but it has not got the resources that it needs. It's like, departments within a company, right? That's like the detoxification system is like the department that's underfunded, understaffed, under budget, doesn't have what it needs to do its job very well. And so that's my understanding. That's the main reason that especially if you have a lot of these sensitivities, right? If there's a lot of things rather than just, if there's only one specific thing and you're totally great with everything else, then it's more of a genetic component. But if you generally have an issue with, several things, then I see it more as that.
I have a quick question for that with the detoxification system of that not having enough of the resources or enough capacity to do its job. How does that then really, impact the premature aging?
Well, this was a strong theory in the whole anti-aging world for a while, that the main cause of like premature aging was oxidants, right? Free radicals. And that's where antioxidants became a really huge thing, like all the different antioxidant supplements and treatments and stuff like that. That's been a bit discredited, I would say, that it's like the main cause of aging. But it's definitely a factor, right? Like all of these things are a factor. So inflammation, I would say, is still more credible from a mainstream scientific medical point of view as like a cause of premature aging. The lack of antioxidants or the buildup of toxins is more credible, but they're interrelated. So you don't have to believe that free radicals, like I think if you think, okay, free radicals and other toxins are the key to premature aging, then you might be wrong if you think of it as simply as that. But if you think an excess level of those building up will dysregulate the immune system even more, driving even more inflammation, then you could say that it is related, right? And so I think that's how both things could be true simultaneously. And we're trying to work out, if there's two huge schools of thought that completely disagree with each other, I always try and work out the context within which each is right. So I think it's true to say that just taking antioxidants on its own is not enough because you haven't dealt with all the other stuff. And that's why there's very little research showing that, taking antioxidants reduces premature aging, because all these scientific studies are always like only taking one element in isolation, right? But I would say as part of a holistic plan, supporting the body in with antioxidants, supporting the detoxification system with antioxidants, while also addressing all the other stuff that we talked about in this episode and other episodes, is actually really effective.
Wonderful. So now let's get to a little bit of the practical that we have these allergies. What can we do?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is we have to remove the triggers, at least temporarily, right? I talked about it a little bit when we talked about testing, but once you've ascertained that I'm reacting to this, you have to remove it, because you cannot wave a magic wand over the immune system to say to stop reacting to this while you are still having it come into your system, right? You can't wave a magic wand in general, but it definitely can't happen while your body's in the middle of reacting to it. So first, you've got to identify where they are. Second, you've got to remove them. Now, generally, I would say a lot of the kind of alternative practitioners, that's pretty much where they leave it. And then they say, and then generally focus on getting healthy, and hopefully they'll go away. And after a while, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, try having it again. Hopefully you won't react to it. I would say that's basically true, but I would go a little bit further and say, yes, all of that's true. So you have to identify them, you have to remove them, you have to give your immune system a chance to calm down and stop being in a reactive mode, right? That's absolutely true. But I would say third, you also want to work on reducing excessive histamine, and you want to work on reducing excessive inflammation specifically. Now, will working on being generally healthy do that? Yes, to some degree. But again, if you've got real issues with this, you want to pull out all the stops and really work on those things specifically, I would say. Well,
what are the best ways to reduce the histamine and the inflammation?
Okay, the $1 million question, we finally got to it. I know I like to do a lot of preamble, but again, I feel like if I could start the episode with just do this, but the thing is, if you don't understand why you need to do something, you either will never do it, or you at least won't stick to it. So that's why I do a lot of preamble every time, right? I want you to have a really, really strong, powerful why. And I'm not, if I was even more into that, I'd be like scaring you with, here are all the terrible ways that could go wrong if you don't. I'm not going to do that, right? But I will at least help you to understand why all these things are so important. So anyway, everything that I said in the chronic pain episode is super important here. So again, refer to that. So I'll highlight some of those and then talk about a couple of other things as well, more specifically. So first of all, chronic infections, right? Those need to be dealt with. So long as you have chronic infections in all the areas that are technically outside the body, like we talked about in the last episode, your immune system can stay in that inflammatory state, and it's not possible to be in a position for most people where you don't react to everything as long as that's going on. Second of all, endorphins, right? Endorphins are really important. I explained that in great detail again in the previous episode, but kind of bottom line, the best thing that I've found, and the thing, by the way, which I see these days by people who know what they're doing, often are recommended to people with genuine autoimmune diseases. So autoimmune is a bit of a funny one, because I would put a lot more in the autoimmune category than is technically put in it. To me, autoimmunity is simply whenever your immune system is attacking the cells of your own body mistakenly, right? And that actually happens a lot. And this is I looked it up, technically gum disease is not considered autoimmunity, for instance, but my dentist considered it autoimmunity, so it's not 100% settled as to what isn't autoimmunity. But anyway, with the severe autoimmune diseases, like for instance, Hashimoto's, where your immune system is attacking your own thyroid gland, which obviously is really serious. We talked about why a well-functioning thyroid gland is important. What is often recommended, this is how I found this, by the way, trying to work out how to help someone with Hashimoto's, is low-dose naltrexone. So again, in a nutshell, it helps the immune system work better. It is a low dose of a drug. So this is not something you can just go and buy. You need to work with someone who can prescribe this to you. But again, people like naturopathic doctor, functional medicine doctor, those kind of people, even nutritionists, I think, over in the US, they will be able to prescribe something like that to you. That is if you just want a pill, that's as close as you're going to get, that I found, at reducing inflammation and stopping that heightened immune response. Thyroid, again, super important. If your thyroid is suboptimal, that can make all the difference in the world. There's a huge amount of evidence that basically, if you could look at it from a certain lens, that all of these immune system problems are caused by the thyroid not working. Now, I don't think it's as simple as that, but it's such a big deal and such a crucial issue that you have to resolve that it's easy to believe that if you actually look into it, if you do detailed research. Ditto with cortisol and the adrenals, right? We talked about that already a little bit. But if you're low cortisol, you may actually want to consider not only doing things that stimulate it, because that's like stimulating something you're already low on. You might actually want to supplement it temporarily. Do not do it without testing and without supervision. Certainly not without testing if you're someone who refuses to see anyone. Like, if you already have high cortisol and then you take things to increase cortisol, you will make everything worse and you will feel like crap. So you want to be absolutely sure that your cortisol is low before you do that. But of course, again, this is mainstream medicine, right? They give you hydrocortisone. They give you, when they say they give you steroids for pain or for inflammation, that's cortisol. That's what they're giving you, a form of cortisol. So if your cortisol is low, again, you can do everything else and it won't work. So that's like a crucial thing that you have to discover if that's an issue and resolve it. I have personally found thymus peptide support to be really helpful. Unfortunately, compared to the other things I listed, I would say it's more expensive, at least to do in the doses that are effective. I think everything else I've listed is, I don't know, depends a lot of factors, but like $100 a month or less to treat. I think if you really want to go for it and support the thymus with peptides, you're talking several $100s. If you really want to go for it, basically, you could spend thousands on peptides every month to support your thymus, and you would not have an excessive amount of thymus support. So that's kind of the problem with it. But if you've got enough money to throw everything at it, that is definitely something that I would consider to be significantly effective to lower the inflammation generally. I do not think I found any peptide yet that specifically works on allergies and that specifically works on lowering histamine. But regulating the immune system is ultimately what it's all about. Even though we did the whole thing about histamine and the mast cells and all the rest of it. But basically, yes, there's a genetic tendency. But as we said, if you're super healthy, if your immune system is super regulated, then it can override even all of that. Adequate sleep and relaxation. That's why I mentioned melatonin and serotonin earlier. Now, I realize that's a catch-22, right? When you're already agitated and irritated and stimulated by an excess of histamine, by some kind of symptoms. But that's where you may want some support. That's why, a lot of people will take antihistamines to get to sleep, obviously, if they're having a histamine reaction. That makes sense. But may I suggest, if you can, adding in melatonin, maybe eventually, with doctor supervision, if they are involved in you taking antihistamines, replacing with melatonin, at least to be able to get to sleep. That melatonin isn't good for everyone. For some people, they do better with 5-HTP, which is the direct precursor to serotonin, which your body then turns into melatonin. I was
going to ask real quick, because we have discussed when you do take things that your body naturally makes, then it tends to lower its production. So how would you support somebody that needs that melatonin support, but you're also wanting their bodies to kick in and make its own?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of concern about melatonin, but the research I've actually seen says that, even though, yes, it is true that the dose of melatonin in a supplement is usually way higher than we make ourselves, but the research says that even prolonged periods of taking way higher doses than in the average supplement do not significantly interfere with the body's own ability to produce melatonin. Now, the key word there is probably significantly. So yes, it's true that if you are used to taking a large amount of melatonin, 10 milligrams a night, and then you stop, it's true that for the first night or two or whatever, you might less easily go to sleep. But I think the point is the body recovers quickly enough. This is what the research tends to indicate. The people who are concerned about melatonin supplementation are more concerned with high levels messing with other hormones potentially. I think there's some indications it could decrease testosterone a bit, for instance. But in terms of the down regulation, I think that we've all tend to emphasize that because maybe we've had the experience of taking melatonin for a few nights and then not taking it, and then, I'm not sleepy straight away. But the research actually shows it's no big deal. The body actually bounces right back. That's what I've seen. Again, if you've seen research saying something different, put it in the comments. But that's what I've come across. And I think that research actually surprised people because there was this understanding that it would. I mean, downregulation's a bit of an issue of everything I've talked about, except for low-dose naltrexone, which does the opposite, which encourages your body to make more. But, thyroid support, cortisol support, thymus support, all those things, there is that danger that your body will make less itself. In the case of thyroid, there's definitely that danger, but it's a case of if your body's not making it, then you're either going to suffer or you give it what it's not making itself. It's really the same with the thymus. With cortisol, the thinking is actually a bit different. It's usually that you have the support temporarily, usually for a few weeks or months, just to help your adrenal glands kind of recover a bit. And then often actually you are, what's the word? You have less tapered off it. And then, so cortisol is not something that people take permanently. So again, depends case by case. And then the last thing that I already talked about is cold, right? That it absolutely reduces inflammation. I said people like Wim Hof have really done a lot of effort at proving that under extreme conditions. And I have found practically it really reduces histamine as well. So cold showers, whatever, something like that, especially if it's regular. If you keep spiking the cortisol, then you keep knocking the inflammation down, is really effective as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot that we can look at and do. I want to refer back to the pain episode, because we discussed very in depth in that episode that, just how emotions can interplay. So within that, with allergies, can there be a correlation to emotions with this?
100%. And I know you know the answer. So, Krissy, yeah, it has a huge impact. So again, I cannot do the subject justice. That's, we spent such a long time talking about the pain episode, so I refer you to that. But I'll just mention, there's the whole field of psychoneuroimmunology. So basically the connection between your mind, your nervous system, and your immune system. It's huge. And so this is where there are some modalities to treat this particular issue, which are absolutely, I would say, working on that level. So one of them is something called NATE. Forgive me, I can't remember what the first, it's someone's name and it's long, but it stands for someone allergy elimination technique. Basically, it's kind of, what they do is they have you be in the presence of this allergen, and then they work on the acupuncture channels. And from anyone's, any mainstream person's perspective, it is pure pseudoscience. However, loads of people find it to be highly, highly effective at permanently treating and addressing allergies. Now, for me, I would say it helped with a couple of things, and then it stopped helping. And I was, again, I'm always skeptical. I'm always open and always skeptical. So I was like, this seems like a little bit of, nonsense. It was actually a lot more effective for my wife. But I soon found out the answer to that. My wife had way more genuine allergies and intolerances, as we talked about. With me, the issue is actually something different. So that could explain why it was less effective for me. But yeah, so whether you want to believe it's pure placebo or pseudoscience or not, the point is it works. And as we said, placebo is not a dismissive word. Placebo is actually a huge thing. And I refer you to the previous episode where we really get into that in detail. There's a bunch of other stuff. I can't remember the name of it, but there's something that my functional medicine doctor recommended that apparently a lot of them do. And it was like a course. And basically the bottom line is you did this kind of little ritual every day where you basically told your limbic system to stop reacting to things. And again, loads and loads of people, it absolutely worked. I was sensitive to everything. Now, of course, the skeptics will immediately say, well, if you could just ritual, talk, whatever, yourself out of this situation, it was never real in the first place. But it's well, define real. If you mean that they were imagining that their body was flooded with histamine, and I don't think so, right? But if you mean that the mind was at the root, the mind and really emotions were at the root of the situation, maybe so. But does that mean it's not real? I mean, the deeper you get into that, it's a rabbit hole. But it's possible that even major diseases that kill people, that a significant component is psychoneuroimmunology, because most of these that kill people are certainly related to the immune system. They're certainly related to the inflammation, usually directly, if not indirectly. So who's to say? So again, when I say this, I'm not minimizing your suffering. I'm not saying it's not real. I absolutely believe that your immune system is genuinely reacting. I absolutely believe that your histamine is high. Of course, that's why you maybe feel better when you take antihistamines or anti-inflammatories. But what I'm also saying is that the reason the immune system is dysregulated could be related to the feelings. And again, how it all relates, you got to check out the previous episode because it'd take way too long to explain again.
I was going to say, I'm always extremely fascinated by this body. It's not just one thing. Everything's so interconnected, interwoven. It's quite fascinating to me. So no, I'm glad. Thank you for the education. Now I want to get into, let's say somebody is right in the middle of, an allergy. They're in an acute position. What can they do in the moment?
Okay. So first of all, if you feel hot and bothered in any way, cold, right? And you often will, if this is happening in the summer months especially. But of course, I know we have allergies in the depth of winter, but I'm just saying that's a particularly easy one if that is the case. Even if it's in the depth of winter, you might be in a hot room, you might find cooling down makes it better. Low dose naltrexone, I already said. I know, unfortunately, it's a drug. It's the number one thing I'd recommend, even though I don't sell it, right? So maybe that gives me some credibility with this. I would look into that. Now, having said that, in terms of things that we do have available, well, some of this list anyway, maybe less than half actually. Curcumin. Curcumin, which is an extract from turmeric, has been found to be really effective for inflammation in general. I would say for my wife, other than all the more in-depth stuff, like in terms of what was immediately effective for her, that was actually the most, which I was surprised about. I'd never really found curcumin done that much to me, to be honest. But again, because that wasn't my major issue, but for her, it's been really good. And again, when I do the research, I'm like, oh, it's not just her, right? There's a reason why this supplement is ubiquitous these days. It's because there is study after study after study after study after study showing that it's effective for all kinds of things that are inflammation related. So that's definitely good. These issues, and I've talked a lot about other stuff, but these issues absolutely can be caused by and therefore resolved by something as simple as a deficiency, a nutritional deficiency. Some of the key nutrients are vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, and vitamin B2. Now, having said that, and zinc. Sorry, no, I've got that later. Yeah, under minerals. But yeah, in terms of vitamins, those are the vitamins. And now, those are like the prime culprits, but actually the way that, nutrients work, it's that any essential nutrient is, if you're missing any essential nutrient, everything stops working properly. Not missing. If you don't have enough, if you don't have an optimal amount of every essential nutrient, then everything can stop working properly. And at least some stuff often will stop working properly. So any nutrient deficiency can do it, but specifically vitamin A is crucial for that histamine response, for the immune system working properly. It's not often focused on. It's because, most people have enough vitamin A, but especially if you're on a restrictive diet, which you may well be if you're having food allergies, especially if you're on a vegan diet. Yeah, there's tons of beta carotene and carotenoids in, bright colored foods like carrots and stuff, but your body isn't always great at turning that into the active form that you can actually use, retinol. And so, you can either supplement with it if you want to be vegan, that's totally fine, or more animal foods tend to be high in it. Liver, obviously, super high, and animal fats in general, butter, all that kind of stuff. Vitamin C, obviously, much more of a plant food thing. That will help. I think it helps through the mechanism of reducing stress, but whatever reason, there's a lot of research that shows that helps. Vitamin D, of course, through regulating the immune system. You want to get vitamin D3, sunlight, or supplementation, pretty much are the options. Some organ meats have, levels, but most people don't want to do that every day. B2, especially riboflavin. I mean, all the B vitamins are very important for the whole nervous system to work properly, but B2 especially, you often see that in like allergy supplements for a reason, because it's especially helpful at reducing that mast cell activity. And then some of the herbs, so or extracts from herbs. So quercetin is a flavonoid, especially high in like onions. It's basically like this yellow color pigment, and it's in most like allergy and intolerance supplements. It helps to stop that reactiveness specifically, as well as reducing inflammation. Feverfew is like a herb that is often added, again, for the similar reason. It stops that reactiveness. Resveratrol is another one. I actually didn't know this. When I was looking this up, I was like, oh, I better add this to the allergy category on the Feel Younger, get them to do that. So yeah, resveratrol is another one. Resveratrol is another flavonoid. Does that mean that drinking red wine is good for allergies? Probably not. Sorry, but because there's hardly any resveratrol in wine. But yeah, like a decent dose, like a supplemental dose, is probably what you actually need to make a difference with that. So all through the mechanisms of reducing inflammation and supporting the reduction of like reactivity of those histamine releasing enzymes. PEA works slightly differently. I talked about this with pain, but it's an endocannabinoid that actually has been found to have some impact to help with the reducing inflammation certainly, but also reducing that immune response to allergens. I would say PEA may only work, or it may also work just through calming you down. So that's possible as well, and reducing pain and reducing discomfort. Practical stuff. So this is like controversial to some people, but enemas and colonics, right? People don't want to do it, but it absolutely reduces histamine. As we said, histamine, one of the places it builds up is in the digestive tract. So that's one of my theories as to why it will just like immediately, you will, just like cold, will immediately reduce at least the symptoms of like an allergy response. So will an enema or colonic, because it's just draining away a bunch of the histamine, reducing inflammation.
I was going to say, I want to ask you, and this is probably where you were just about to go, is that, there are stories out there where we are actually carrying around 5 to 10 to even more pounds of fecal matter that is just stuck in that large intestine, which would then be creating not very nice things for us, correct?
Yes. Well, that's a theory that we'll probably get into more detail with the detoxification episodes, but I don't know if that is proven in terms of being in the colon, because the argument to that always, which I think is actually valid, sorry, alternative people, from the mainstream media is, from the mainstream medicine kind of media, is that when people do a colonoscopy, they put a camera up there, there's not a lot in there. Like, all it takes is taking a laxative and it looks pretty clear in most people. But I would say actually the issue is it builds up in the small intestine, not in the large intestine. It's not easy to get a camera in the small intestine. In fact, you can really only do it by cutting a person open. So there's less certainty and confidence about exactly what is going on inside a living small intestine than most of the medical establishment is going to want to acknowledge. But yeah, I would say that's a much more likely culprit. That absolutely. So could waste be trapped in there? Yes. Could there be chronic pathogenic organisms building up in there that shouldn't be there, that are adding poisons to the system that go into the bloodstream, that are aggravating the immune system? Absolutely. Could there be like literal waste rotting in there, which also creates poisons that get into the bloodstream and irritate the immune system? Absolutely. So I think the point is that when you do an enema colonic, yes, clearing out the colon is not such a big deal. I actually agree with the mainstream medical establishment about that. But I think it's the knock-on effect that when the large intestine is suddenly completely and unnaturally cleared, the small intestine then starts to release via that ileocecal valve more of the stuff that's in the small intestine. And then that is the thing that potentially like provides some relief. Now, having said that, of course, people are like, I'm not putting anything up there no matter what. Fasting actually probably has a similar effect, right? Just not eating anything, because it now can be more problematic because, in a different way, because fasting, if you've got a bunch of hungry pathogenic organisms in there, they don't like it when you suddenly stop feeding them. So not everyone feels great when they fast. And of course, your body needs food and nutrients and stuff. So if you're already nutritionally deficient, it can make things worse. So I'm actually also not a believer that fasting is always a good idea. But yeah, it can actually help. And I would say liver flushing, which again is something that is not considered mainstream science, but this idea of doing, and we'll talk about it more when we get to detoxification, but this idea of clearing this backlog of sludge, this stuck-ish bile, which is in the liver and the gallbladder. Anecdotally, we've seen it again and again when we do that the person, allergies and intolerances go down a lot. As to why that is, we can only speculate. Maybe more bile starting to flow through the intestines again helps to clear away some of those pathogenic organisms, which then helps the immune system calm down. Maybe clearing away the stuck bile in there helps the liver do its processes that it does better. It does a million different things in the liver. It's very prolific. And so maybe some of those processes of detoxifying better will then mean that there's less of a burden on the immune system. We're not quite sure how it works. As I said, it's disputed by mainstream medicine that it works, but anecdotally, we see a lot of people who do a series of liver flushes will say, all my allergies and intolerances went away. Go figure, right? And then, practical stuff again. We talked about zinc already. We talked about taking DAO enzyme. That's something certainly if you react to foods like cheeses, aged meats, fermented food even. Fermented food's a key one, right? Because a lot of people start taking fermented food because they hear it's good for them and it's got probiotics and stuff, but then they actually don't feel great, And then if that's the case, that may well be a sign. Not necessarily if you eat fermented food and you feel worse, it could be that the good bacteria are fighting bad bacteria. That's possible. But it could also be that actually histamine is like your body's struggling to break down the histamine. As I said, probably the easiest way of doing that actually is not to do a blood test, but just to buy the supplement and take it and see if that helps or not. If it doesn't, that's probably not the issue.
Wonderful, Elwin. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing everything that you have. We've got a lot of information to, help us get through these allergies, intolerances, and sensitivities. So, before we come to a close, is there any other final thoughts or any other things that you'd like to share?
Yeah, just because I've brushed over it a little bit in this episode, because we did it so much in the last one, I will say that when I've studied this a lot, obviously, because I had my issues myself. And if you are tempted to do all the practical stuff first, I don't blame you, and I would actually encourage it, right? Test for this, test for that, make sure you got enough of this, make sure you got enough of that. Get on top of all that stuff. But if you're in a situation where nothing seems to work, then I would strongly encourage you, make sure that you consider this whole field of psychoneuroimmunology, consider the impact that your feelings and your thoughts are having on your nervous system and your immune system, and really get into that. Don't dismiss that. By all means, don't start with it. Get the practical stuff done first, because you can, be trying to work on your emotions and all the rest of it, and then you're just low in vitamin A, or you're just low in cortisol or something. Like, get that practical stuff dealt with first, by all means, but please don't forget about or dismiss the other stuff.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us on this episode of the Rejuvenate podcast. And remember, if you like what you heard, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode. And we'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed that episode. And if you did, I want to tell you about a way that you can support the podcast while also getting great deals on high quality supplements that Elwin and I personally use, and that's Feel Younger. What I love about Feel Younger is that they have great quality products with minimal fillers at a very affordable price. You can call their customer support team 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, and in my experience, they're very helpful and friendly. And the thing I love most of all is the amazing descriptions that Elwin has written about each product category on that topic. And each product has so much education on it that I've actually learned more from reading the descriptions than I have from a lot of articles. So to support the podcast, please use Feel Younger for all your supplement needs. And to let them know we sent you, use promo code RejuvenateMe for 20% off your first order at feelyounger.net. That's 20% off your first order using promo code RejuvenateMe at feelyounger.net.